Over on Jaguar Gator 8, a new college football video is out. In this one, we talk about the 1988 Colorado Buffaloes and how a costly decision they made during the bowl selection process cost them $1.2 million. Click the card in the upper right corner to watch. And now, on with our feature presentation. November 17th, 1968. One of the most infamous days in the history of football on television. When the New York Jets played the Oakland Raiders on NBC, most fans were expecting an incredible game between the top team in the AFL East and the top team in the AFL West. And what they got was an absolute classic, as they got an incredible game. The only problem? Nobody got to see how it ended, because with the Jets leading 32-29 and the game running past 3 hours, NBC decided, for some brilliant reason, to stop airing the game before it ended, and to show the start of the television movie Heidi instead. Sure enough, the Raiders scored 14 points in the final minute and won it 43-32, with no one knowing about it until reading the papers the next day or seeing a ticker appear in the middle of the movie during the saddest part and the emotional climax. After that controversy, nothing like this ever happened again, as from now on, every network was going to show a game in its entirety, and would not cut off the ending to air another program. Or so we thought, because let's fast forward 3 years to December 19th, 1971, with Cleveland playing Washington in a game between two playoff teams in the final week of the regular season. The game started at 1 o'clock Eastern, and football fans were excited to watch these two good teams square off before they would eventually play in the postseason. But at 2 o'clock, midway through the game, NBC decided to switch the broadcast to a completely different game between the Baltimore Colts and the New England Patriots, leading to fans showing up at the station to pound on the doors and try to break in, and leading to over 2,500 calls being received, jamming up the NBC phone lines. I made a video about that incident, so if you want to learn more about what I'm calling Heidi Game 2, click the card in the upper right corner. After that controversy, nothing like this ever happened again, as from now on, every network was going to show a game in its entirety, and would not cut off the ending to air another program. Or so we thought, because it's time to talk about Heidi Game 3, or Heidi Game 2000. If there's anything that unites football fans, it's the anger you get when you're not able to watch your team play. And man, do Kansas City Chiefs and San Diego Chargers fans know the feeling well. Because in a 2000 game between the two AFC West rivals, CBS decided to cut away from the ending of the game, even though the game was extremely close, and even though the game was nearing its thrilling conclusion. And let's just say that this decision was not received well, not in the slightest bit, to the point where near riots broke out over CBS's move to switch the game. This is the story behind Heidi Game 3, and what might be one of the craziest broadcasting controversies in the history of the NFL on CBS. Before I talk about the actual switch in question, we need some context to understand the importance of this game, as well as how the game itself was going. Spoiler alert, the game was going really well, as I wouldn't be doing this video if CBS cut away from the final 30 seconds of a game where one team was up 42-0. It's November 26, 2000, and we're at Qualcomm Stadium for this AFC West matchup between the San Diego Chargers and the Kansas City Chiefs. This is an absolutely monumental game for both teams, but for completely different reasons. For the Chiefs, they entered this game at 5-6, two back of a wildcard spot entering the day with 5 to play. After starting 5-3, the Chiefs have seemingly picked the worst possible time to collapse, having dropped 3 consecutive games. If the Chiefs did not win this game against the Chargers, then you could kiss their playoff hopes goodbye. Considering the fact that the Chiefs won their first game 42-10 when the teams met earlier in the year at Arrowhead Stadium, I'm sure everyone was expecting this to be a get-right game for them. As for the Chargers, this game is big even though they're already mathematically eliminated from playoff contention. And it's big because, well, they're winless. Only 5 games sat between them and becoming the first team since the 1982 Baltimore Colts to finish a season without a win, becoming the first team since the 1976 Tampa Bay Buccaneers to finish a season with all losses, and most infamously, the first team to ever finish a season 0-16. A win here, and as embarrassing as 1-11 through 12 weeks is, you're not going to be remembered as a laughingstock. Plenty of teams finish a season with 1 win, and no one really remembers them as a punchline past a few years. But lose this game and be 75% of the way through the season with a goose egg in the win column? Time to start panicking, because you're just moments away from being a part of the most infamous team statistic in NFL history, and as part of the worst club ever assembled. The Chiefs need to win this game to keep their season alive. The Chargers need to win this game to make people forget their season. And much to the surprise of a lot of people, the game was nothing like the 42-10 drumming that happened earlier in the year. Because Ryan Leaf, who had only thrown 2 touchdown passes in his last 3 home starts this season, was actually looking alright. Leaf threw touchdown passes on back-to-back drives, hitting Freddie Jones for a 20-yard score in the first quarter, and following that up early in the second quarter with a 7-yard touchdown to Jones once again. There was still a lot of time left to play, obviously, but the Chargers were up 14-3. If ever they were going to be in a position to get their first win of the season, this was the time. Even a 14-6 halftime lead was good, and was in a significantly better spot than the Chargers usually found themselves in at the half. All Ryan Leaf had to do was not do anything stupid to come out of the halftime break, and the Chargers would be in a pretty good spot. Never mind, it's gone. A pick 6 by Patton made it 14-13, cutting the gap to a 1-point game. And by the time the fourth quarter started, following a 30-yard field goal by Todd Peterson, the Chiefs led it 16-14. San Diego's offense had begun to stall, with the team going 11 straight drives without a score, resulting in 7 punts, 2 interceptions, and 2 fumbles. Once again, things were looking dire for the Chargers, as they had all season. But if they were going to do anything the rest of the way offensively, they could do it through special teams. I know, the Chargers actually doing something positive on special teams. This seems fake. However, after the defense forced a 3-and-out, and after Nate Jacquet returned the punt 35 yards down the left sideline to make it only a net of 18 yards, the Chargers had the ball in field goal range. And even though the offense got just 3 yards on the ensuing 3 plays, that was all they needed, as John Carney drilled a 52-yard field goal with just over 2 minutes left in the game to make it 16-14 Chargers. One defensive stop was all that stood between the Chargers and the first victory of the season. One bad drive was all that stood between the Chiefs and being eliminated from the playoff picture. The season was coming in the balance on this very drive. And there was also another thing coming in the balance at the same exact time. Because as Chargers fans, Chiefs fans, and football fans across the country waited to find out who the winner of this game would be, Americans were waiting to find out the winner of another event. Enter the 2000 presidential election. Usually, I go very in-depth on the issues that I talk about on this channel for obvious reasons. However, I am not even going to attempt to dive in-depth on the mess that was the 2000 election, because if I detailed every single event of that, I would be here for hours. Plus, there's about 100,000 videos and documentaries that talk about the election, and there is nothing that I can add that hasn't been said already. So if you want to learn more about one of the craziest presidential elections of all time, you've got plenty of material available at your disposal. However, I'm going to give a brief synopsis as it pertains to the story at hand, because finding out whether or not the Chargers were going to win their first game of the season has a direct relationship to the presidential election. Most years, we have a pretty good idea on election day who the winner is going to be, and who the next president of the United States will be. By Tuesday night or early Wednesday morning, it's basically a given as to who will win. This happened with Barack Obama in 2008 and 2012, it happened with Ronald Reagan in 1984 when Walter Mondale stood about as much of a chance of winning as I have at successfully tackling Derrick Henry, and it's happened more often than not. However, there are some exceptions, with this most recent presidential election between Donald Trump and Joe Biden being one of those times where it took until Saturday, a few days after the election, to officially declare a winner. And 2000 was definitely one of those exceptions, because this entire election to determine whether Democratic candidate Al Gore or Republican candidate George W. Bush would be named the 43rd President of the United States hinged on the state of Florida. At the end of election night, Bush was leading Florida by about 1,700 votes, triggering an automatic recount because the margin was that small. The recount reduced the margin to 900 votes after the first day, and eventually got it down to 300 votes. Once Florida was decided, we know who the next president was going to be, but it was going to take some time to count every single ballot. Finally, on November 26th, the recount was certified. By no means was this the end of the saga, as there were still predictably going to be lawsuits filed, but this certification at least got us one step closer to knowing who the president was going to be. And when the recount was certified, it ruled in favor of Bush by 537 votes, giving him the necessary 270 votes to win the Electoral College. After 3 weeks of not knowing the outcome, with it being the closest thing to a toss-up in the history of American presidential elections, barring anything crazy happening with legal challenges, it was official. George W. Bush was the next president. So what does all of this political drama have to do with whether or not head coach Mike Riley can lead the Chargers to their first win of the season? Well, guess when they decided to announce this? The certification was done and announced with less than 2 minutes to go in the game, with the Chargers leading 16-14 and the Chiefs trying to mount a drive to win it. And guess what CBS decided to do when the certification was done? They cut away from the game. And let's just say that on this day, the country was divided into 3 groups. People happy that Bush won, people upset that Gore lost, and people furious that they couldn't see the ending of this game. What you're watching right now is completely unedited, uncut footage from a Japanese broadcast of the game. Japan did not get this breaking news alert. So amazingly enough, the only people who saw how this game ended live were those who were watching in Japan of all places, and those who were watching at Qualcomm Stadium. What you're watching is what the entire country missed. What you're watching is the Chargers stopping Warren Moon from going down the field, playing great defense, and finally picking up their first win of the season. What you're watching is Ryan Leaf taking 3 celebratory kneel downs, getting the monkey off of his back, and getting the first win of the season. And if you were a Chargers or a Chiefs fan watching this game on TV, this might be the first time, 22 years later, that you're ever seeing this footage, because you didn't get a chance to see it live at the time. And when I mean nobody in America got to see it live, I truly mean it. Here's Chris Berman doing an NFL primetime report from the game. Notice how he's expecting a highlight of the defensive stop to be shown, but it never comes, and he has no idea what to do.
John Connie, Sheila McCray, good night everybody! But wait a minute, the Chiefs have the ball. Can the Chargers defense hold? Yes, it's over. It's all over.
It is very rare that you see a legend like Chris Berman of all people pausing for an extended period of time and at a loss for words. But that's exactly what happened here. It truly was a bizarre incident that left everyone confused. CBS affiliates immediately deflected blame for this, as their hands were completely tied. Cody Ginsburg, the sports producer at KFMB, the CBS affiliate in San Diego, said that not only did they have no choice but to show the news, but that there wasn't even a network feed of the game available. Every CBS station had to switch, no exceptions. As Ginsburg said, our hands were tied. We were sitting there hoping they finished the news report as fast as possible. We were waiting all year for a win, and we couldn't even see it. Don North, the news director for the CBS affiliate in Kansas City, said that he knew that making the switch was the wrong move, and that there was going to be tons of outrage about it. North said, as soon as it happened, I called down to the station and said, number 1, get ready to answer the phone. And number 2, get ready to run a crawl on the screen so people know what happened in the game. When it comes to network programming like today's game, the network is in charge of switches. We don't have the option of not letting them cut in. The main thing is, we want people to know that we apologize for what happened, and that it was out of our control. Usually, when I do broadcasting controversies like this, the directors of the affiliates are defending the move. So when the directors at CBS affiliates are upset about the move and are universally agreeing that this decision by the network was the wrong call, you can imagine how people watching the game felt. Here's just a sample of some of the reactions, not counting the hundreds upon hundreds of fans that flooded the phone lines demanding to know why they switched the game. Kevin Carlisle, a Chiefs fan, said, "We can find out about the election anytime. I wanted to see how the game ended." He's got a point. CBS easily could have gone the Howard Cosell route in the 1980 Monday Night Football game between the New England Patriots and the Miami Dolphins when announcing the assassination of John Lennon. There is no real difference whether you find out Bush wins now or in 5 minutes. But considering the fact that this was a live sporting event nearing its thrilling conclusion, yeah, it's kind of important for people to be able to see it. Richard Williams, the owner of a sports bar, said the Chargers game is much more newsworthy than something we already knew was going to happen. Again, he's got a point there. Bush winning is not like a tornado report where you have to cut away because your life is at risk. And Bush had the lead in every single recount report, plus the initial report. So even though it was still up in the air, I think most people knew that by this point, Bush was going to win. Mike Bowles, a Chargers fan, said, "I couldn't care less if the Chargers went 0-30, but at least they could show the end of the game." And Nancy Nadeau, the general manager of a bar in Kansas City, said people were yelling and screaming, and no one could believe that would happen. we had to run and turn the radio on, with bartender Jeff Marin adding, "I thought we were going to have a riot on our hands." And the crazy part is that the report ended 6 minutes after the game ended, so I don't really know what CBS was doing. If CBS just minimized the game for 20 seconds and did split screen, and said, "We interrupt this game to tell you that the Florida vote has been certified, and George W. Bush has won the recount, making him the 43rd President of the United States. We'll have more details after the game, but if you want to learn more now, go to CBS.com. Then boom, problem solved. You give the people the news they need to hear, you don't interrupt the game, and everyone's happy." Instead, to do this was a bafflingly bad decision on CBS's part, and I don't know what else they expected. And of course, the results of a presidential election are more important than a football game, and I'm not saying otherwise. But come on. Surely there was a better way to break the news than this, which might have been the worst possible option. You'd think networks would know by now not to cut away from the endings of close football games to show other content. But CBS clearly did not get the memo in 2000. Call it Heidi Game 2000. Call it Heidi Game 3 if we're considering the Cleveland-Washington game from 1971 as the second Heidi Game. Call it whatever you want. But whatever the case, this was a horrible plan of strategery on the part of CBS. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, and subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot. And be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL Trivia and win cash prizes. Link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JaguarGator9. To see college football videos, subscribe to JaguarGator8. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.